Hey guys, and welcome back to the Ground Up Show, the podcast hosted from my dining room. Today on the podcast, I'm sitting down with documentary filmmaker Sarah Moshman. Her most recent documentary follows four women as they row from America to Australia completely unassisted. It's an amazing film, super powerful. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this conversation as well. On the episode, we talk about how to overcome resistance when you're following a path of nonconformity, how to balance ambition with your personal life, and also practical steps if you're looking to get funding on your first feature film or major project. But first, if you've enjoyed this podcast so far, I would love it if you would make a small contribution on Patreon. Patreon is a community that I have been creating exclusive videos and content for over the past couple months. And I've been able to delve deeper into topics like lifestyle design, filmmaking, how I make my videos, and much, much more. You can check it out at patreon.com/Matt Diavella. Thank you guys so much for watching and enjoy the show. I got the dirt. I did lots of research.
Whoa.
I know that's not true.
That's
I don't do tons of research.
Great.
But
be surprised when you hear things.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like whenever you hop into a conversation,
You don't know.
you don't want to know everything about somebody. You want to be able to explore and learn and poke
Yeah.
at different things. So
Great.
that's my excuse for not
That's
doing my
fine.
diligent research.
I don't mind. It's great.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast.
Great to be here.
Really excited to chat with you. A lot to talk about, from filmmaking to a lot in filmmaking, from making your films happen to finding the stories and all that. But also what I really find fascinating about your work is the focus on finding strong, powerful stories from women, and also the resistance that a lot of women and people in general face when you come up against obstacles that a lot of people would turn away or quit. Has facing resistance been a part of your own personal story? And how does that kind of work its way into your films?
Certainly. I think anytime you're doing something that's different from what your friends, family, colleagues are doing, it can be scary, it can be overwhelming, and you perhaps face the largest amount of resistance from yourself. Like, am I capable of this? That imposter syndrome can set in. Because for the past about 5 years, I've been working on my own projects, really like creating my own opportunities instead of waiting for the phone to ring or for someone to pick me. I've been picking myself. So honestly, the biggest resistance is just in my own brain saying, are you capable of this? You've never done this before. Are you sure you're ready? And just having to like power through all of that.
I think that's probably a common theme of anybody who follows an untraditional path or people who achieve success, even in a corporate type environment. You can't wait for the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It kind of stems for me from when I went to college, the University of Miami in Florida. I was so homesick my first 2 years, really. I grew up in Chicago and had never really been away from home before. Like, I'm talking no overnight camp, like none of that. So I was just, I guess, a homebody and didn't even know it. And so having to leave my comfort zone and find all new friends and activities and like lifestyle, I didn't know anybody there. I'm glad I persevered through that experience, because now as an adult and someone in my career, that's all I do is leave my comfort zone. I don't really have a comfort zone anymore. So, and especially now as a new parent, a mother, every day I'm finding a new comfort zone, whatever that looks like. So I'm glad that I had to persevere through several experiences that were uncomfortable and difficult and not normal for me. And so because of that, now I love to travel and I love to try new things and put myself in situations that I know I'll have to learn and grow.
Were there some moments or big things that you did early on that pushed you out of your comfort zone? I know for me, like I just like that. I was a homebody, but I think I just didn't want to admit it to myself or anybody else. Like, I watch a lot of TV and I'm like, oh no, I know about other cultures. And meanwhile, I hadn't been on a plane until I was 18 years old.
Wow.
I hadn't left the country until I was 25, 26.
Wow. Yeah.
A couple reasons why, like in part because I was I was ambitious and I was starting film and doing freelance client work, and I just didn't want to move too far away from it and stay busy. And also it stemmed from growing up with a family of 7 kids and just not having a lot of money.
Totally.
And so there was both those that I had all the excuses in the world, but eventually I was like, all right, you know what? I need to like just see the world a little bit and travel. And it opens you up in a way.
Totally.
It's more of like I think like internal wiring, right?
It really is.
Yeah, it's not knowledge.
It's like the only thing you spend your money on that makes you richer. I love that because it's just so true. You can't even articulate all the ways in which you're growing as a person when you travel. So it's pretty powerful. Earlier this year, I went to Djibouti in Africa, and in a couple weeks, I'm headed to Uzbekistan. Both places I never, ever, ever thought I would go. And filmmaking and teaching and being able to share my love of the camera is what is bringing me to these places. So that's really exciting and powerful. And I never thought that would be part of my life. So
it's amazing to be able to have the overlap, right? To be able to have the camera take you somewhere. I think there's something to be said for just exploring and traveling, period. But if you're able to kind of marry the two, do you have a trouble with the work-life balance? I know that some people, everybody talks about it, but at least from my perspective, a lot of times it's from people who maybe don't like their work, that need the balance. But I'm obviously all of us can go a little bit too far on the work end of things.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm figuring that out every day, especially as a mother now. It's just the inner dialogue is like, am I being enough of this? Am I being enough of that? Am I letting this person down? Am I, that feeling of guilt? So I think about that stuff all the time. I talk about it in therapy. It's just a big part of my life is thinking about that. But I try not to beat myself up too much because I do really love the work that I do. And it's a fabric of who I am, is making documentaries, is helping to tell stories about women and powerful role models is really important to me. So I find that I struggle to turn off. Like it's hard to be present and just be in the moment sometimes. Having a child does help with that because you kind of can't help but be present because she's like crawling around my house and I have to make sure she's not gonna fall. So it forces you to be present as a parent. But that would be my biggest struggle in terms of like work-life balance, would be enjoying those moments of stillness and quiet when they come, knowing that the work will be there or that you will find that next job or that next film to work on. Things don't happen exactly when you want them to all the time. And that's just the reality of this business. And you kind of have to just go with the flow and let that be what it is and appreciate those moments that you have on your own. And I think parenthood has really helped me kind of embrace that. But I'm very empathetic, so it's hard to leave my work at work, especially if I work a lot from home. The two are just inextricably intertwined. So I just did an interview I'm working on a documentary right now called Nevertheless, which is about sexual harassment in America. And I just returned from New York and interviewed this guy who was in the Navy and was raped several times as part of his experience there, and just a terrible story. He's a lovely person. I'm so grateful that he shared that with me. But it just kind of sits on your heart. It's not like I'm like, okay, great, thanks, bye, we're done, cut. I've been thinking about his story for days now, and so it's really hard to separate and kind of tease apart what is the film and what is me and my life, because the two are just together. So that's kind of what I struggle with balance, is like how to separate yourself sometimes from your projects when they are so personal to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes we have this idealistic version of what our life will look like.
Yeah.
You might read a book and you'll be like, okay, cool, I'm going to apply this, and then I'm going to be a successful business owner,
right,
and I'm going to have everything
and
that
I
wanted to life. Yeah, it's going to be perfect. And I think the art of being a human and being alive and trying to make things happen is that it's constantly a balancing act.
Yeah.
And maybe we have different seasons where we feel like maybe I'm spending a little bit too much time on work right now, but that's all right. Like I'm pushing towards a deadline, right, and then once this deadline passes, I can rebalance and shift my focus again. I imagine having a child gets you to understand what's definitely not worth sacrificing.
Absolutely.
And brings that into focus for you.
Yeah, I mean, having a child, being a mother, has made me a stronger negotiator, actually. With jobs that come up, it's a lot easier to turn things down because I have to get childcare or put stress on my husband or travel. There's so many extra factors now. So if there's a rate that doesn't meet my demands, it might not be worth it. So that's made me a stronger negotiator, which I appreciate. I think in the past I would have taken a job without fighting for more money, maybe out of fear, out of feeling like, oh, they're not going to want me if I ask for more money. Like there's just that weird internal money struggle too. But it's been a lot easier this year to be like, if you can't meet this rate, then it's just not worth my time. And that feels good. And this year it actually has worked really well to say like, this is what I'm worth. And if you can't meet that, then you can find somebody else, but good luck. It's like,
I really love that
nice.
lesson. Cause a lot of times you might think it's going to be only more struggle, more challenges to be faced with a child. And I'm sure that's definitely true in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But that's one of those silver linings that I think hopefully you can learn it early on when it's hard because negotiating and being in a position where you can say no to something means that you have enough on your plate, either from a work sense or from like your family. Like you said, you're like, I'm sorry, just it needs to be really worth it for me.
Yeah.
Because I only take X amount of projects a year. Because
Right,
the rest of the time I got to be with my family.
I got to be with her. Yeah. And I've also been having this inner dialogue about working moms and how much they struggle in the workforce. So there's a pretty startling statistic that I learned from the Status of Women and Girls report in California, which is that working mothers, the wage gap between women who are mothers that work versus women who work that are not currently mothers is greater than the wage gap between men and women, which is really shocking. But also now that I'm here and I see it and I get it, I understand like how so many women are pushed out of the workforce. We're just not supported at any step of the journey. I mean, as soon as you give birth to the baby, it is not about you anymore. It's just about the baby. And it's isolating and it's devastating. I mean, I had no maternity leave whatsoever. I'm a freelance filmmaker, entrepreneur. So I had to save money and create my own. Nobody supported me in that sense. And then you get to the breastfeeding phase of your journey if you choose to do that, and then there's no place to pump. So even if you are working in the world, you feel very isolated and bizarre that you have to go to like on a bathroom floor and pump milk for your baby so that you can get home to her and feed her. I mean, it's just crazy. There's like nowhere to go. You go to the bathroom to like change your kid and there's no changing table, like just every step of the way. And then God forbid you have any mental health struggles. Therapy, at least under my insurance, is not covered. Just like there's no arms wide open welcoming mothers and helping them be the best version of themselves and or in the working world. So I've just have so many friends who have faced pregnancy discrimination, certainly been demoted, whether it's been unconscious or conscious bias, and that comes from men and from women. It's not gender specific. Some women in positions of leadership will also project their own experiences on other women and be like, you don't want to work, or like, you don't want to travel. So that's been another layer for me this year, is having this inner dialogue of like, you have something to prove. And whether it's to myself or to like society, I don't know, but there's definitely a force in my brain thinking like, you've got to kill it this year and prove that you can do all of the things. Because other women are counting on you, and I just want anyone to never count me out. I think that's a big fear of mine, is that someone will have this great opportunity and they won't ask me. They won't even ask if I'm available, if I'm interested, because they're like, oh, she's a mom, she wouldn't want to do it. And that happens all the time to me, to so many women I know. So that's definitely important to me. It's just to prove that women who work that are moms can do whatever they want, or not. They can also stay home if they feel like it, and great, good for you. That's to me what feminism is choice, is ability to choose what your life should look like and not be afraid to like own that. So that was much more than you bargained for in that answer.
No,
but I think that's what really goes on in my head now as a mother and as a filmmaker.
Well, I think that's amazing though too, because like you said, so many different circumstances. So many people are going to choose a different path when they get there. Yeah. And it's not to make somebody feel guilty for not, continuing to put in the work. It really depends on your own ambition, what you want to get out of it. And if you want to take a year off, that's amazing.
Awesome.
Take a year off.
Yeah.
You'll
be there for every second. I just don't feel the most myself unless I'm also a filmmaker. That's who I've been for my entire life. And I haven't wanted to be a mom my whole life. She was planned, and we're very happy to have her here. Her name's Bryce. She's 10 months old today. I'm totally in love with her. That I think people often intertwine those as well. Like, I can be obsessed with my daughter and still want to go over here and work and travel. Like, those are totally separate things to me. But oftentimes we intertwine the two.
Right. And I think it's so helpful to have things outside of your career.
Totally.
Outside of the things that are achievement based. I can't wait to have kids. But it's the same things that you're going through now are the things that Natalie and I are talking about.
Yeah.
And it's really big challenges. It's really big questions. It's
totally.
And it's also getting out in front of it.
Yeah.
And trying to be open about our communication to figure out, okay, how is this going to work? How are we both going to be able to continue to achieve? And she's very passionate in her work, and same with myself.
Yeah.
How can we still continue to have that without sacrificing too much?
Yeah, exactly. And just being a good team is a great place to start, whether you have a kid or not. Just like having that open communication and just being on the same page that you're in it together. Another really interesting, frustrating part of this journey is that we don't give fathers a lot of credit. And then when fathers are mediocre to better than mediocre, we celebrate them profusely. There's billboards out here, right here in Hollywood that say, be a father today. And it's like,
that's the
just
bar.
Today.
Yeah.
How about every day? Like, there's nothing like that for mothers. It's like we need to remind our fathers to take part in their children's lives. That's insane.
Yeah, or like you see some a father with a child at the grocery store. I know, like when my brother goes out with his baby at the grocery store, everybody is like, wow.
The bar is so low, you guys. Yeah, totally.
Father
of the year, and then like, I'm just supposed to be really good at this, which I'm not. This doesn't come naturally to me.
Right.
I'd never changed a diaper before. Like, I'm doing my best. So like, I feel like the bar is so high for me and that I'll never meet it. And then Ryan, who actually is a wonderful father and partner and all of the things, deserves the credit, but still, it's just like he's getting parades thrown in his honor for like just taking her to the mall. It's like, what?
Yeah, I guess that is so funny. I guess it's just one of those things that you observe, and you try not to affect your own well-being. And it's like the resistance, right? You come across those things sometimes. I watched your TEDx talk and talking about some of the resistance that the 4-star Navy captain
Admiral.
or Admiral, like
Michelle Howard.
Yeah. What was the quote that she said? It was
when you're in a position, and you're in a minority group, and that can mean there's just not a lot of you in the occupation, you don't have the luxury of being average.
Yeah, it's
profound.
To be in that position, you are going to face this massive amount of resistance. There's going to be like the whole tide is kind of pushing against you.
Yeah.
And that's a case where it's much more drastic. She was 18 years old when she was women weren't even allowed to enter the Navy up until this point.
Yeah.
So think about that tide. And now we have this subtle tide that still is, I think, a negative detriment on our well-being, but it's about trying to be mindful and not letting that stop you from moving forward.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Let's talk about your filmmaking career. So that film specifically was your first feature-length doc, but how did you first get into filmmaking?
So what we were just talking about was the Empowerment Project, which is my first feature. But I've been making docs since I was a teenager. Pretty much when I was 16 is when I made my first film. My parents very kindly got me a video camera. It was one of those like Sony Hi8 cameras that had like sepia tone and slow motion and black and white. It was pretty cool, you guys. And mostly made just like silly music videos with friends, but pre-YouTube. But the first film I made was called Family Isn't Just Blood. And it was this very profound piece for my high school English class, where I interviewed classmates of mine that had different family dynamics than my own. So I grew up with, mom, dad, brother, sister, which I thought was so boring. And so I wanted to interview my friend who had gay parents, and I had another friend who was adopted, and another friend who was artificially inseminated, and all the things. I just wanted to learn more about people different than me, and that was a really amazing experience. And so I just kept making films, and then went to the University of Miami in Florida to study film. I made lots of terrible films there that I thought were so good at the time, narrative and documentary. I tried every position on the set, just wanted to learn as much as I could outside of class, and then moved out to LA 2008. So as soon as I graduated, like 10 years ago. And then I started working in reality TV. I got my very first job on Dancing with the Stars.
Wow.
A little show. You might have heard of it.
Little show.
Little ditty. Right here down the road, actually, at CBS Television City. And I began as a story assistant on that show, which means that you're out in the field. There's like a 2-minute video package that airs before the celebrity and dancer dance live every Monday night. It is still on, you guys. Oh my God. They're on season 27.
Similar format still?
Same form. Oh my God, the same format.
Isn't it amazing how like they're like, well, it's perfect. It works.
Oh my
Let's
God.
keep with it.
I've just learned that like until ABC finds another show that can garner as much ad dollars, then forget it. It's going to stay put. But I worked on seasons 7 through 16. So I did 10 seasons of the show. I worked as a story assistant and then moved up to associate producer and then field producer, which was great. It was a great experience. I learned a ton. I met like every 90s R&B star that I ever loved growing up. Lots of Olympians, lots of NFL Super Bowl champs. I mean, and everybody in between. Buzz Aldrin, that's a highlight.
Oh, wow. I should have led with Buzz.
I know. Well, you got to finish with Buzz.
Yeah, there you go.
He was amazing. And they wanted him to do the moonwalk. I mean, come on.
Oh, my God.
So good. I mean, he couldn't do it.
He couldn't do it. There's no way that Buzz
I mean,
is doing
come
the
on. But it was great. And I worked on a bunch of other shows for like Lifetime and Bravo and the Food Network and MTV. And that was like a whole other chapter of my career, the first 5 years in LA. And it was great, so educational, and really complemented the skills of being a documentary filmmaker, but I really missed that. I missed the feeling of being in film school where you're just supposed to create and you're just supposed to try things and fail and fall down and like just be artistic. And I missed that freedom of creativity. And so during my hiatuses on the shows I was working on, I would make short documentaries to kind of get back into it. So my first short documentary outside of school was called Girls Rock Chicago, and was about this all girls rock and roll camp in Chicago. But it's actually international. There are girls rock camps all over the world. And we showed up on day one of the camp, and we picked 3 of the bands to follow throughout the journey, and they learned guitar, bass, and drums within a week. And they wrote their own songs. And then by like Saturday, they're performing at the Metro in Chicago, which is like a venue of 1,000 people. It was so cool. And it just got me back into the making of films and recognizing that I could develop those skills again and tell stories that really mattered to me. And so then I made another short documentary called Growing Up Strong Girls on the Run, which is about a organization called Girls on the Run that teaches girls really important lessons about bullying, gossiping, self-esteem while they train for a 5K event. So there is that like fitness, self-esteem element. And then I decided maybe I should try my hand at a feature. And so The Empowerment Project is my first feature-length documentary. And that film came straight from the heart. The idea was, what if I drive across the United States and interview inspirational women from all different careers, from a pilot to an athlete, astronaut, mathematician, a 4-star admiral in the Navy, a stylist, a theater director, as many careers as we could possibly pack into this road trip. And I drove across the U.S. with 4 other female filmmakers, and it was the most fun, transformative month ever. Actually, we got back from the road trip 5 years ago yesterday, which is crazy. And we drove over 7,000 miles through 22 states. Once we got back, we spent about 6 or 7 months in post-production. And then the film, The Empowerment Project, was done in April 2014. So that was my first feature. And we raised the money on Kickstarter and found a private donor through Kickstarter. And we made that film for like $50,000. I mean, it was like nothing.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it depends if it's a filmmaker listening or not.
Yeah, totally.
The people that are not into filmmaking are like, 50,000,
Like,
that's a lot of money.
Well, at the time, it felt like so much.
It's like, that gets you through like color grading and sound design, and that's it. But
Totally.
It must have felt pretty amazing though to go from a position where you're maybe working on a project like Dancing with the Stars where you don't have a lot of the creative control, or at least telling the stories that you wanted to tell. You have no choice over the stories you're telling. So moving into the Empowerment Project, it must have been empowering.
It was
What's
very
the word?
freeing.
What's the word?
It was just so freeing. It was like oh, there's no boss over our shoulder. There's no one to check in with at the end of the day to be like, how did it go? I mean, it was so liberating. But also by the time we got to the road trip, we had already raised money on Kickstarter and spent months planning. So it was also a celebration of the hard work we had put in to that point. That was really exciting too. It's not like we just got in the car. So yeah, it was a moment of freedom, of empowerment, and what if this could be what I do all the time? What if this could be the start to something bigger? And what if this could create revenue that would sustain a living? And all of those things happened. So
one of my favorite quotes that I got, a piece of advice, was that if your story doesn't change along the way, then you're not listening.
Totally.
What did you learn from making the film? What were some of the takeaways for you that you experienced both in filming and editing and meeting with all these women?
Yeah, I think one of the big takeaways was that as women, we're more alike than we are different. And that was exciting to witness, because when you're going to interview a 4-star admiral, for example, again, Michelle Howard, who's unbelievable, you might not think you have anything in common with her. And then you sit down and you have this conversation and you find out we're actually exactly the same. We face a lot of the same struggles. It's just in a different industry. And to find that commonality and to find that universal experience was really exciting and really connecting. And the 5 of us, after we'd do an interview, would get back in the minivan and just sort of sit there and talk about what it was like and what we learned and how we grew. And that was sort of, it was like a multi-layered, empowered experience. We also mentored aspiring female filmmakers on set. So that's not really a part of the film, but we kind of behind the scenes did that. So we had like women write in and ask to join our crew, and they weren't like getting us coffee. We were teaching them how to use the lights and the cameras. So it was really this like multi-layered empowerment experience. It was like this really special bubble for a month. It was awesome.
Yeah, I think that the mentoring is such an important aspect. Like everybody needs that. They just need a little bit of guidance, a little bit of positive reinforcement. Because I remember starting out, it didn't feel like I could do it. It didn't feel like, I mean, the world's a lot different from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you look at it and you're like, can you make it as a professional filmmaker?
Right.
And the only options really are within the industry.
Right.
YouTube was just getting started out, and there was no professional YouTuber at the time. There was no ad revenue or anything like that. But now the world's opening up and you see more examples of it, but still a lot of doubt when you're first starting out.
Absolutely. Especially because I don't know about your experience, but at film school that I went to and others that I teach at, they really don't prepare you for anything after graduation. You leave film school being like, I want to be a director. It's like, great. Where do they hire those? Like
Right.
you're not going to like get a job as a director right out of school. I mean, that if you are, that's the exception to the rule. So then how do you parlay that into practical skills to earn money to pay your bills? So that's like a harsh realization when you get out of college, especially if you have debt. It's like, what? I thought I was going to be directing films and yeah, but most people I know start, of course you start at the bottom. You're a production assistant, you're a story assistant, you're an executive assistant, whatever. That's harsh when you kind of come out feeling really great and then you're like, oh no, I have to totally find my way. I have to carve my own path. And so for me, working in television was a great place to start to kind of get the lay of the land of what it means to live in LA and work in this business, and then realize one of my favorite quotes during the time where I was sort of like, I need to do something else was, sometimes you climb the ladder of success to find it was on the wrong wall. Mm-hmm. And that was profound for me because I felt like I was doing really well at Dancing with the Stars, and I would get comments from my coworkers like, Sarah, you're going to be running the show someday. And I was just like, thanks. I don't know if that's something I aspire to. Like it's a compliment. I hope that means you see some leadership skills in me, but that's not really what my dream is. And I felt like I had gotten off track. Like, well, I came out here to make movies. I came out here to be a director, and I'm doing an arm of that. I get a little bit of that, but not enough to like fill my soul. So yeah, when I was about 25 in 2012, 2013 is really when I kind of took this sharp turn.
Yeah, I think that it's step one when you graduate college or you're trying to enter the workforce for the first time. Get experience and pay the bills.
Totally. You have to.
You have to pay the bills. And you can't.
It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Yeah. I mean, that's the harsh reality, but I think it will motivate you to get that experience because that's what's going to be able to allow you to increase your rate and do all these things and make it in any creative or any field in general is just to get really good at something.
Yeah.
But what I loved about what you did is that like you said, when you leave college, it's like, well, where do they hire directors? But you kind of, you made the role, right?
Yeah.
You invented it. You can be a director if you just set out and say, I'm going to be a director.
Right.
Grab a camera. Let's do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's funny how I'm 10 years in now, let's say 5 years to like my chapter. And it only feels like now, like this year, 2018, that I'm finally getting opportunities to direct other people's project or other work that I'm really interested in that's totally in line with like my mission and my message. So it takes a while to cultivate that relationship, to, you know, let people know kind of, I mean, I kind of am annoyed by like, what's your brand? But it's true. Mm-hmm. Like if all the work that I'm doing is very much in this category, in this lane, then other people see me as that and then will recommend me for work in that same category. And that's finally starting to pay off this year, which has been really, really exciting, is to get other directing work.
And do you prefer, I guess, did you have a preference there, or in terms of creating your own projects and directing them versus partnering with other people to make projects happen?
I think it's a nice combination of all of it. I'm not opposed to any of it as long as you're working with passionate people that have, you know, the right intention. I kind of like having multiple projects going at the same time now. I think with the Empowerment Project, I was just focused on that. Then my second feature is called Losing Sight of Shore, and I was just focused on that for 2 years, really. I don't really have the luxury of just focusing on one thing right now, so it's kind of nice to have multiple projects going at once. And so Nevertheless, which is the film I'm making now, I'm about a year into production, but I've been picking it up and putting it down, and that's been really nice, actually, to have that going on in the background and always moving it forward in some way, but being able to stop and work on something else. So it's been nice.
I think that's what you can do as you get better, as you get more experience. Because when you
can delegate.
Yeah, and when you do the first film, you have no idea what you're doing. You're like, all right, let's just try to make this happen.
Yeah.
But then as you get more experience, as you build up your skill set, you can, you know, start to juggle. You can start to bring a few more things into the mix, and I think the challenging part is knowing when it's too much, knowing when you're getting overworked and overwhelmed, and the quality of what you're creating is actually going to suffer in the long run.
Definitely. I've gotten better this year at delegating to others. Like with my past films, because we just didn't have a big budget, I would just take on all these extra roles, like assistant editing, you know, post supervising, whatever you want to call it, like just moving things forward when that's not my skill set. Like I'm not a superstar editor, but I can hire an assistant editor that can help me, you know, streamline the process and get my editor set up for success. So this year it's been nice actually to kind of take some of the brunt of the responsibility off of my shoulders, simply because I don't have the time. But it's been really freeing to kind of bring other people into the process and be like, you're way better at this. You should do that, not me.
Yeah.
And here's some money, you know?
I'm so jealous of you for that. Because I just take it all on my back and I'm like, I'll do the editing, I'll do the color grading, I'll do the sound mix, I'll do the shooting. I listen, I think that there's a power in that, especially early on.
Oh yeah.
If you can
need to learn
full
too.
Responsibility of every aspect of production, it's possible to get something done. And I think that's going to allow you to create things when there are no budget, when there's nobody that believes in you or your project.
Yeah.
But then as you move along, you know, it's if you want to be able to keep your sanity, spend time with your kids, it's about delegating and hiring the right people to help you execute your vision.
And they're going to make your vision even better, honestly, just bringing in the fresh eyes and, you know, the different perspectives, especially with something like sexual harassment. It's so easy to kind of be in your own vacuum of your opinion or what you've read or what you've thought, but bringing in other people to help me kind of see outside of my blind spots, my own privileges, has been really important. So I'm trying to embrace the delegation.
Absolutely. Losing Sight of Shore.
Yes.
What an awesome documentary.
Thank
Had a
you.
chance to watch it on Netflix.
Oh, great.
So yeah, talk about, this is how we met. We met at some like random get together from mutual friends.
With Chris and Zach.
Yeah, who are on the podcast.
Yes.
And you know, just hearing about that story, I was like, oh, I got to check out this film. This sounds amazing. But really interesting in terms of how you found the story, and also I guess how the story found you in a lot of ways. So you want to talk about
Sure. So after making the Empowerment Project, I did a lot of like touring with the film. We actually show it in schools and groups and organizations and corporations all over the world. It's been an amazing distribution education, which we can talk more about. But there's a blogger in the UK named Fiona Tatton, and she had interviewed me about the Empowerment Project previously. And so in late January of 2015, I got an email from her that simply innocently said, hey, Sarah, I just came across these 4 women who are about to row a boat across the entire Pacific Ocean. I thought you might want to know about it. I mean, it was like the most innocent little email. I had no idea that email would truly change my life, and that the 2 years that followed would be like the greatest adventure I could have ever imagined. And from that email, I ended up Skyping with 2 of the rowers the next day with really no intention other than to help them, decide what GoPro to buy. Like, I just really had no idea what this even was. I didn't even know people did that. I'm not an athlete, definitely not a rower. So I'm total novice in this situation. And so I got on Skype with Laura and Natalia, who are now 2 of my heroes. And I was just blown away. I was just so overwhelmed with the idea that they were going to do something so impossible, so dangerous. They were training for it, sure, but they were not professional athletes. They were not professional rowers. And I was so taken by their energy and their spirit and how they wanted to prove what the human spirit really is capable of. And it really wasn't about rowing at all. And that really spoke to me. And they made me feel like I could do it too. Like they simultaneously were so welcoming and also so impressive. And I loved their, who they were as people. So by the end of that very first Skype, I was like, I have to make this movie. I have to help you tell your story. And I have no idea how I'm going to do it, but I'll figure it out. And it was, I have to mention, it was like the worst possible timing, because I think people act as though these things come up and you're like, perfect, I had nothing on the calendar for the next 2 years, or like the next 3 months I was wide open. Yeah. Like, no. In fact, the next day after that email, I had to do a whole tour with the Empowerment Project for 2 months. I was on the road, so no time to fundraise, no time to really plan. But 3 months after that initial Skype, I was standing on the dock in San Francisco, and at 3:00 in the morning because of tides, I guess. And I watched them row away with essentially my life savings in the form of cameras, hard drives, and microphones. And so I taught them how to use the cameras. I really tried to empower them to be storytellers, even though they definitely weren't. And I had no idea, I cannot stress this enough, I had no idea if I'd have a film on the other side. I didn't know if they would make it. I didn't know what that would look like. Didn't know how long it would take. I knew a whole lot of nothing, but I just wanted to try. And no one else was telling their story, which I thought was astounding. That I was like, how is ESPN not all over this? Or how is National Geographic? I mean, I was just shocked, which perhaps is a reflection of our culture and, maybe not caring as much about women's stories. I don't know. But whatever the reason, no one was telling their story. And I just felt this tremendous responsibility to try. And it was amazing. I would meet them on land along the way. So the way the journey worked was it was a 3-stage journey, but they were totally unsupported. So no support boat, no camera boat. They were totally alone out there in the middle of the Pacific, which is the point. They were rowing from America to Australia, over 8,000 miles. They thought it was going to take about 6 months. In total, it ended up taking about 9 months to row the Pacific. And they'd stop on land for about a week, 10 days, and restock their boat with food and get, steps on solid ground and call their families. But for the most part, it was a quick turnaround. And then they'd be back on the water again. So I would be there on land. I would collect the hard drives from the boat and pray that anything was on them.
I mean, that first time when you saw them go away, that must take so much bravery. I couldn't imagine taking all this camera gear that I have in this room and then just giving it to
some people you kind of know
that don't know how to use it, and you're like, good luck.
Yeah. I mean, I was with them for 4 days before they left, but yeah. And then what ended up happening is they ended up having a bit of an emergency and going back to Santa Barbara, and they started in San Francisco, which was actually a huge blessing because I wasn't going to see them until Hawaii, which would be months later. So 16 days into their trip, they ended up coming into Santa Barbara to fix their boat. So it was great. So I got to look at the footage they'd shot so far, which was terrible.
Oh my God, really?
Oh my God, it was so bad.
What a great little trial.
It was
test.
perfect. It was for everyone.
Yeah.
Everyone was like, okay, well, now we know what we're doing. Let's go.
Yeah.
So they really had to restart. And so I went back over everything on the camera. I'm like, here's the microphone. If you don't turn it on, you get no audio, things like that. Or here's how you focus. Just a refresher course.
Wow.
So I'm so grateful. That was like meant to be. And also I didn't have any footage of them at sea. So I rented a boat and a captain and went out and saw their tiny pink dot on the horizon for the first time. And it was so powerful to see them in action. And that helped me cut together like my first sizzle reel, which then I used to apply for grants, and it just goes from there. So yeah, it was great.
I mean, yeah, that is a great segue into how to sell and how to, it seems like from our conversation in the past that you're very thoughtful about how to not only make a great film, but to be able to, how do we get the money for it? How do we make it practical? How do we make revenue on it with education programs and sponsorships and partnerships and all this stuff? Talk about that, the sizzle reel and creating that, and how does that help you?
Yeah. I mean, I really think of myself as an entrepreneur as well as a filmmaker, or they're just one and the same. I think we should think of a filmmaker as an entrepreneur because that's essentially what it is. I mean, you're starting a business, you're creating a product, you have to find an audience or consumer base for that product. That might take all the art and like sexiness out of it, but to me, that's at its core what we're trying to do here. These films aren't any good unless people watch them. So I really enjoy the entire process, especially now that I'm on my third and fourth feature. I'm really starting to enjoy from the seed of the idea through fundraising, through, creating it, production to post-production to who the heck's going to want to watch it and how do I access those people. And that's different for every project and it's different for every filmmaker, every social impact element of documentary. But it's exciting. It's like a cool puzzle to fit together for me. And so I'm a huge fan of crowdfunding. I really believe in the principles of, gathering your audience from the start. I've applied for several grants. I was rejected from 9 grants before I got my first one for Losing Sight of Shore. And then we ended up getting 4 grants.
Where do you go to get a grant? Like, what would somebody do if they're like, hey, I want to get a grant for my film?
Sure. There's so many. Yeah. I highly encourage people to, there's not like one database. International Documentary Association has a pretty good database, actually. It's just documentary.org. That's a good place to start. And a lot of them actually share the same application now. It's called the Core app, kind of like the Common app when you're applying for college. So it's really nice because instead of having to fill out 10 different applications with 10 different questionnaires, it's kind of all the same. And they're asking you like, what's your budget? Who are you? What's your previous work? Who's going to watch this? Who are your characters? Like all that stuff that you should know anyway. Mm-hmm. So if nothing else, filling out these grant applications helps you articulate what the heck it is you're trying to do. But there's so many grants available and some of them are specific to the subject matter of the film. Some of them are specific to the filmmaker. There's definitely a lot that are women specific or people of color specific, or student specific. There's so many resources out there. And the best piece of advice I got about grants was this instructor I worked with. And she said, if you don't apply, some other idiot will. And I just thought that's profound because you just don't know. You don't know what they're looking for and why not try? It is time consuming. And if you don't get any, of course, it feels like you put in all this work for no money. But when you do get one, you're suddenly like, grants are amazing. Yeah. Why doesn't everyone apply? And a lot of these grants come with resources. So I got the Tribeca All Access grant. So that's the Tribeca Film Institute. And so it was a $10,000 grant, which is great. But better than that, they sent me to New York to pitch my project as part of their marketplace. So with Losing Sight of Shore, when we were in post-production, I was able to pitch the film 30 times in 2 days. Wow. to distributors, film festival programmers, post-production houses for resources, financiers, sales agents, I mean, you name it. And not only that, it wasn't like me going up to someone's table and being like, hey, can I talk to you? It was, we've seen your trailer. We're interested in this. We want to meet with you. So it's sort of like speed dating for distribution. Yeah. And it was great. And I learned so much and I felt so good that I was able to like articulate my project and I knew who my characters were and I knew they had made it to Australia and I like knew I had a movie. So it was a really amazing experience and that led to more funding. It led to my sales agent ultimately. And the sales agent led to Netflix. So I've kind of done it a bunch of different ways. I've had investors as well for Losing Sight of Shore. The combination of funding was necessary. Not a lot of people believed not that they didn't believe in the project, but not a lot of people were writing me checks because what if they don't make it? And that was very scary to put a lot of my own money in at the beginning because we don't even know what this is yet. What if they just go to Santa Barbara and then quit? Or what if Hawaii is the end of the road and then you have no movie? So it was hugely risky. And luckily I came into contact with a husband and wife that wanted to invest in the documentary and believed in me and the vision, and they're wonderful people. And so they helped me get through production. Then I finally started to get some grants, doing a little bit of kind of informal crowdfunding so you can kind of claw tooth and nail to like piece it together. But these things are always hard. I mean, documentaries, you don't exactly know what film it is that you're making. So how do you get people to believe in you? So it's gotten a little easier over time, I will say. On number 3, it's gotten a little easier, not much, but I can kind of go back to people that funded me before and say, if you liked what I did there, here's what I'm doing now. It doesn't always work, but that's a good place to start. People I didn't know to contact the first time around. Crowdfunding I did again this year. I raised $57,821 from 610 backers with a 3-month-old at home.
Wow.
For Nevertheless, because it mattered so much to me, and I had no funding. I needed to get started, and crowdfunding was a great place to start because I really didn't know what stories I wanted to tell exactly, but I knew I had the wherewithal to finish it or to pull it off. So yeah.
Filmmaking is obviously very messy. A lot of this stuff is very messy. I think anytime you have business and entrepreneurship and there's no just straight line.
No.
Sometimes I don't think there's ever a straight line in life, whether you're working a corporate 9-to-5 route or otherwise. If you want to progress and if you want to grow, it's going to be sticky and weird and awkward, and you're going to have uncomfortable conversations. And I think that it is about facing those uncomfortable conversations. It's about, I don't know about you. You're probably better at it than I am, but like making a phone call to try to like pitch an investor or try to talk, I would get so nervous. I'd have to write a script out, and I'd have to be like, I need to be really prepared for this. And I would still find that really challenging today. Yeah. Do you find it easier to face these uncomfortable situations the longer that you've been doing them, or is there still a certain amount of putting yourself out of your comfort zone?
Oh yeah, there's always nerves. Imposter syndrome is very real, but I would say as I move forward in my process making a film, I'm getting to know the film better and better. And what I mean by that is, like, as somebody's like, oh, what are you working on now? And I'll say, I'm making a documentary about sexual harassment. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to talk about that? And so it's like, you just start to pay attention to what questions people have, when their eyes start to glaze over, when they're engaged and interested, when they're like, oh, wow, I've never heard a story like that before. So I'm kind of always like in a little bit of a focus group situation as I'm moving through the world. I'm trying to take notice of what people are responding to understand who my audience is and how I can best serve that audience. With Losing Sight of Shore, I always felt like it was the best, easiest pitch. It was like 4 women got in a boat and they're rowing across the Pacific Ocean. And without fail, every person I said that to would have like 10 follow-up questions. Like, where do they go to the bathroom? How does that work? Like, what do you mean? Did they survive? Everyone was so interested. And so I was like, I must have something here. If I don't totally fuck this up, I've got a great film because people are intrigued. They want to know how this could happen, how this could be pulled off. So I just was paying attention to what people wanted to know about the journey. And that helped me inform the edit. And so same with Nevertheless, like I'm just a constant sponge of articles and research. And of course, obviously, with our current political discourse, there's so much to ingest and to understand.
What do you mean? Everything's perfect.
What do you mean? Then it's like, you've got your own experiences that you're trying to serve and understand. And then the interviews that you do are quite emotional. And I truly believe that when someone shares their story with me, it's then my responsibility to share it with the world. It's kind of like they've given it to me. They've passed this like torch, whether I want it or not. And so I have to go do something with it. Otherwise, it was worthless for them to have so much of an open wound or pain with me. And so... yeah, I'm just you're always paying attention to who could your audience be? Where do they watch their content is another big one. With Losing Sight of Shore, I always knew that Netflix would be the right home for it. They have such a worldwide audience. And to me, this story transcends, language or borders, time. I really, truly believed in my heart that anyone could be inspired by their story of perseverance and bravery and courage. But with Nevertheless, it's a little bit trickier because I want men to be a large part of my audience, but I don't know if they're going to be signing up or buying a ticket to watch a film like this, even though they're the ones I want to reach the most. So how do you get, the sometimes opposing party to take part in your dialogue when that's the last thing on their list to watch? Maybe. So that's a huge challenge this time, is like wanting to invite everyone to the table for these somewhat uncomfortable dialogues when I don't want to just preach to the choir. I don't want to just have all women in the audience being like, yes, I feel seen, I feel heard, this is my experience. Yeah, that's important. I want that. But nothing will really change unless more people watch the film that aren't used to hearing these dialogues and stories. So yeah, each film kind of presents its own challenges, which I like.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with having intuition and, like you were saying, listening. So you talk with people, you have all these conversations about a film, about a project that you're working on, and do their eyes light up?
Yeah.
Is it something people are genuinely interested in? Because unless you're talking to your mom or somebody who's really close to you, that's going to be, I don't know. I guess even people who are close to you don't bullshit.
No,
if
they might not be into it.
Yeah. But like, is it somebody that's just being polite? Is somebody actually just trying to be nice? In which case, they still will likely not be that interested. They're not going to ask a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
So if you have a project, you have to be very aware of how people respond to your elevator pitch.
Exactly.
And if it's a little bit uncomfortable, you're still going to be able to sense something. Like, oh, okay, maybe this is something that is worth poking at and finding a hole. But I do like the approach that you're taking with this new film, where it's like you're not trying to create enemies, or you're not trying to like make people look bad, but it's just like, hey, let's talk about this. Let's have a discussion about something that people don't talk about enough.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not looking to point the finger at any one person or company. It's more about the systems that are in place in our country, but really all over the world, that help perpetuate this behavior. I think it's kind of foolish to think that sexual harassment is boiled down to one person's actions, when really it's our culture and the way that we set up our interactions in the workplace that we're all a part of. Women too. I mean, it's astounding when we think about, even just at our core, the language that we use to talk about each other can be very disrespectful. The story that I think rings true the most is when I was about 5 or 6 months pregnant last year, and I was standing in front of my building with my husband, and our neighbor came up to us, and this is like a 30-year-old white straight cisgender male who's married, very nice, a friend of ours, right? That matters, I guess. And he came up to us and was like, hey, do you guys know what you're having yet, a girl or boy? And we were like, no, we're not. We hope for a girl, but we're good either way. And he goes, you know what? It's fine. If you end up having a daughter, all you have to do is think about someday someone's going to fuck your daughter.
Somebody said that? What?
To our faces. And this is someone we liked. This was not some like creep in the shadows. This is like a normal person we interacted with on a daily basis. And it was so shocking to me, because if he's going to say that in front of our faces, what kind of terrible language is he using about women and girls behind our backs, anyone's back? And not only that, but the structure of that sentence matters, right? He didn't say your daughter's going to have sex someday, because of course she will. I hope she loves sex. But the sentence was that it's going to happen to her, as if she was going to have like no agency in the matter. And that matters, the way that we talk like that. And so it bothered me on so many levels, because he was sexualizing my unborn child, who I didn't even know was a girl yet. And then when we found out she was going to be a girl, instead of being super excited, which I totally would have been before that comment, because my entire life's work is about empowering women and girls. So it was like should have been this awesome moment. My husband was so excited, but I felt this tremendous weight on my shoulders. I felt like, what is this going to be like if this is the kind of bullshit we have to navigate from people we like and trust, in California, a seemingly progressive place? It was just it was a moment for me, and shocking that that's how insidious this behavior can be. And again, he's not like a bad guy. And I think that's important, is that we are like, oh, he couldn't have done that. He's such a good guy. It's like, but all of us are capable of good and bad at varying degrees all the time forever. Like, it's just sort of a silly argument to be like, but he's mostly good. Like, okay, but we still have to address what's happening, is that I don't walk around saying things like that like deeply offend someone in my life. I don't think I do.
Yeah,
I'm generally a very respectful person.
Right.
So it's like, why can't we get the same courtesy? So
yeah, I think I think what's helpful too is to know that people can change. I have said horrible things in my life. When I was a kid, I was a little shit, and I would say things just to get for the shock value, right? Just to get somebody to laugh or to get a reaction out of somebody. Part of it is growing up and maturing. Right. But then also, I think culture can also mature.
Of course.
All of us are maturing.
We all have these terms now that we didn't have before that we should be using, like in a good way. Like we're starting to articulate what is sexual harassment, what is sexual assault, what does constitute as that, and how do we refer to, like just these different ways to refer to each other in a good way. We finally have the vocabulary to talk about the nuances that happen. And so I think that's really exciting. And I totally agree. It's, again, everyone is capable of good and bad at varying degrees. So I'm not like he's a bad guy. He's just, that's a surface level, like a symbol of a larger problem in our culture. That's what the film is about. Is like, how are the ways in which that we raise our girls and boys perpetuating ultimately this behavior? Or how is our legal system set up where it ends up silencing victims, and instead of making them want to come forward, we're seeing so many examples of women who do come forward, women and men that come forward and are silenced in many different ways, or let's talk about masculinity and how it doesn't really, toxic masculinity rather, it doesn't really serve anybody. It really doesn't serve the men that are, exuding it, and it doesn't serve the women to which they're, dehumanizing in a lot of situations. So the film is really not about like, you're bad, you're good, or this is right or this is wrong. It's like, let's just take a look at our culture and what's happening and how all these forces really do come together to perpetuate this cycle of behavior. So again, it's just not about this one perpetrator, this one CEO that's a terrible harasser. We have to remember that there's a whole system of people that helped uplift that person or help them hide their behavior. So it's not just the one person, it's all of us. It's me too. It's like, how do we all, but really, how do we all do better? And what can I do? Well, I can speak up in situations where I'm being spoken to in an offensive way, or I can speak up for others. I don't need to be an impartial bystander, as they call it. Like there's that's part of a lot of the trainings that people do that I've been talking with, is like, how do we encourage bystanders to speak up when they're not even involved in the situation, whether it's assault, harassment, even just offensive language? How do we empower the people around us to take action too, so that it's not just all on the victim? So yeah, I think that's really, I've been filming for a year now on and off, and it's been quite enlightening and challenging and, so far outside my comfort zone. I've definitely been forced to check my own blind spots and privileges, and it'd be very easy to make like a white feminist film, and that's not what I want to make. I really want to be as inclusive as possible and represent as many perspectives as I can, which is not easy, and you can't please everyone. But I'm doing my best to ask those uncomfortable questions. Yeah, when you're making a film like this, and in a lot of ways, it's kind of like walking on eggshells or trying to make sure that you don't startle somebody away who could really get value from the film. And I think a large part of that comes from tone. Totally. And that's something that really has to come through in every part of the film from the very beginning. Interviews from even obviously before the interviews, but say when you sit down to interview somebody, you want to make sure that the tone of that conversation comes across in the right way, and that because that's how you're really going to be able to create a film that people can look at objectively and get something from, and really change their mind and perspective on something from. Yeah, I think my sort of thesis of the project is like to inform, uplift, and inspire. It's like, I don't want people to leave the theater or the screening or whatever, like feeling like, oh, the world is terrible and we're never going to get this right. Like that's the opposite of how I want people to feel. It's really the tone of, I had no idea it was this bad, or I had never heard those experiences before. And now I feel like I have the tools to help others in the future. Or how can I examine my own behavior, my own biases and privileges so that I can be a better ally in the workplace. So that's really what it's about to me. And I hope that comes across as the overall tone of the film is less like, you're the worst, you effed up. It's like, no, we're all complicit in some way to this society, this culture. So how can we all be better?
I love it. Can't wait to check out the film. Do you want to do quick questions?
Okay.
Quick questions, not quick answers. So feel free to elaborate.
Great.
I think I need to get a jingle for that.
I think so.
I think I need to get a jingle. I have one jingle for the show. If I bring it up, I have to play the jingle. I'm going to bring it up and I'm going to play the jingle. So we talked about The Rock before the show. I don't know if you saw, I recently did a jingle competition. It was the official Get The Rock on Matt's podcast jingle competition. And Sam Tier was the winner and he made this jingle.
Hey, The Rock, don't be impolite, except Matt's invited to the Ground Up Show.
Pretty good.
That's
Sam
awesome.
Tier. I actually met Sam Tier.
Nice.
I went to London a couple of weeks ago and I hand delivered a trophy to him for winning. It just happened. I didn't go intentionally just for him.
It'd be cool if you did.
Maybe I did. But anyway, I think I just came up with the worst excuse to play that jingle. But it was just that I think that I could use another jingle. Yes. So maybe I'll hit up Sam Tier and maybe we can make another. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, quick questions.
Okay.
What is the simplest advice for young creators that's the most important for them to follow?
I would say don't wait for a feeling of being ready, because that just won't ever come. You don't need anyone else's permission to get started on your dream, whatever that looks like for you. Just take a couple steps, see how those feel, take a couple more. Before you know it, you've got a film. I mean, really, just each day chip away at your goal.
How do you get through doubt?
Well, now that I'm a few films in, it's nice that I can look back on past reactions to my work or, moments where I really felt that this journey was worthwhile. Those moments really pull me through. And I do get a lot of wonderful feedback on my films that I save and I can reflect upon. So when I'm feeling doubt, especially with a film like Nevertheless, where there's a lot of, am I enough? Am I the right person to be telling these stories? I look at everything that's unfolding in our country every day. Am I really thinking that I'm going to take this on? There's a lot of that in my head. But there's also this other voice that says, well, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? So
if you could go back to, let's say, 22 years old, what would you do differently? What would you tell the younger version of yourself?
Let's see. Well, it's always good to save money.
Oh my God, that's such a good one.
I'm a good saver, but I think I didn't even know what I was saving for. It was just like, people say you should save money. But I would have done that times 10. I mean, as much as I possibly could have, because when I started to make the Empowerment Project, it was a good year and a half that I had zero paycheck, and it was totally worth it. And I had to lean on my savings. So had I known that I was really going to drop everything in work and go towards this dream ferociously, I probably would have saved a little bit differently. So that's just a good advice for anybody. Save your money.
Oh my God, absolutely. Be smart with your money.
Yes.
One book that I would plug and recommend is The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. That certainly helped me a lot. I think a lot of times it's helpful to have a playbook, to have a little bit of an idea. What does it mean to save your money? What does it mean to get out of debt and to not put yourself into further amounts of debt?
Totally.
Money, so important. And to wrap up this podcast, I have one more question.
Okay.
What is the best way for people to find you online? Where should we send them to?
Instagram at Sarah Moshman, SarahMoshman, and my website is sarahmoshman.com.
Sarah, thank you so much for doing the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to The Ground Up Show. If you're getting some value from the podcast, you can support the show on Patreon. Every month, I create exclusive videos exploring lifestyle design, minimalism, creativity, and business. These vlogs and AMA podcast episodes, which can be found nowhere else, give a rarely seen look into my work and personal life. Help support the show for the cost of a cup of coffee a week and get access to all this content at patreon.com/Matt Diavella. Again, that's patreon.com/Matt Diavella. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.